Welcome to Between the Reads, where Black books are shared and celebrated all year long. I'm your host, Audra Russell. There are so many great things going on this year as I continue to amplify Black stories, but I can't do it without your support. Please consider heading over to patreon.com/betweenthereads and becoming a member, or make a one-time donation at www.ko-fi.com/betweenthereadspodcast. Are you ready, boos and bros? Then sit back, relax, and let's get to it. Today's guest is Navy veteran, former professor of psychology and public speaker Seanathan Polidore. He has published 5 books: What's Your Kick?, The 5 Laws of Leadership, The Anatomy of a Book, The Butterfly Effect, and Expanding Your Vision, The Hero's Journey. Among Sean's many accomplishments are a master's degree in psychology and over a decade of experience in public speaking. Sean, welcome to Between the Reads.
Thank you very much. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. That was an amazing introduction. I should record that and keep it and just play it on a regular basis. Man, you did a wonderful job with the introduction. I am so glad to be here. I'm honored. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm glad, because we tried this once before and it didn't work. So I'm glad we were able to get you back in the room, because I think that you are one of these Black men out here that people are sleeping on. So it is my duty, my privilege to make sure that we get people on your books and let them know to stop sleeping on Mr. Polidore.
Yeah, man, let's do it. Thank you very much for that, man. And I love your platform, and we all need a platform like yours to help give us that light and give us that leeway to express ourselves. So thank you for what you're doing. Give you your flowers while we can.
Thank you so much, sir. Well, let's get right to this book, The Anatomy of a Book. Tell our readers what it's all about.
The book concept came when I realized, even amongst my avid reader friends, some of the people I knew, they skipped the introduction, skipped the prologue, skipped the forward. They go straight to page 1, chapter 1. And then I thought about how much information that they're missing when you skip those parts to the book, let alone the afterword, bibliography, etc. So I said, you know what? I want to make a book explaining why these parts are important. Mm-hmm. And also on the front part of my book, I'm giving the reader per chapter different reasons why you should increase your reading ability, how it helps different parts of your life. So that's pretty much the book in a nutshell. The first half is kind of why you should read, and the second half breaks down the parts of a book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really to me, it's like we were taught word attack skills, or at least, I'm showing my age here. We were taught word attack skills. We were taught how to break the word apart and how to sound it out. And we understood that letters made sounds and those sounds made a word. And your book is really the same thing, but for a book, it's a book attack. It shows you how to really attack the book, even if you're just reading for pleasure. And, I really like that because, I've been reading a long time and, I come from a family of readers, but I still found, nuggets of information in here that were helpful to me that, I have since incorporated back into my reading. And then you have some books that you also recommended to help with memory and things like that as well that I have put on my reading list. So it's a great book. It's a great book. Absolutely.
If I could get an avid reader like yourself to say something like that, I feel like I did my job. You say something like that, that's a big honor to me.
Yes. So, why did you feel it was important to write this type of a book for people?
I mean, once again, I felt like unless one of us points it out, nobody's seeing it. And people are just skipping things proudly. I'm hearing conversations around me, and a person like, "Oh man, I skipped the introduction." I'm thinking to myself, how could you boldly say something so ignorant? Right? We read a lot of nonfiction, so in any one of my books, the scholar might do a 45-page introduction. They might do a 25 page forward.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say you skipping that, you missing like damn near 70 pages of
Mm-hmm.
content. And it might drop so many nuggets in there for you to follow those rabbit trails,
Yeah.
So I felt it was important to write this book because I need people to stop. Because you're claiming to read 500 books, but you're missing thousands of pages of
Mm-hmm.
content. Like let's slow it down a
Right.
little bit and let's
Mm-hmm.
digest,
Mm-hmm.
right? They want to read like it's a buffet. Like I'm gonna eat some of this,
Mm-hmm.
eat some of this, and it's like let's slow
Mm-hmm.
it down, enjoy the
Right.
entree, enjoy the
Right.
appetizer.
Absolutely.
Get the five
Right.
courses, man.
So, chapter 1 is called Reading is Fun for the Mental, and that's a nice play on an old phrase that I grew up with, which is reading is fundamental. Share more with us about that chapter.
Well, to me, the importance in that chapter, because like whenever I write my books, I'm thinking about young readers and people that's like just starting to read, even if you're an older person. And to me, the biggest part about it that we got to all remember in Bookstagram or wherever, we started this thing because it was fun for us.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like a job. It wasn't something we were doing for views and likes and following and subscriptions. It was just fun to sit down and read. So I wanted the reader to embrace the fun you can find in reading. And whenever you're an active reader, and I talk about that in the chapter
Mm-hmm.
too, people always clown me for highlighting my books and writing in my books. It's an ongoing joke, but I'm being tactile with the book. I'm engaging
Mm-hmm.
the book. I don't look at reading as a passive
Mm-hmm.
activity. I'm very, very active when I read. I'm highlighting, I'm tabbing, I'm debating the author in the margins. Like that make it
Mm-hmm.
fun
Mm-hmm.
for me. So I want to give the reader some kind of ways to look at reading in a different way than what they think reading is.
Okay, so let's go back to that point because that was my next question. You say that reading is not a passive activity like most people think. So let's unpack that a little bit.
Like if I walk into a coffee shop or somewhere and the person's sitting there with a book, they just sitting there flipping pages. To me, it's like you're perusing. Usually, you're casually breezing through. Like reading, if I walk in the coffee shop and the person's sitting there with their pens and their markers and they got highlighters in different colors and might have a reading chart, like you showing me your level of scholarship. You really attacking the book. And that's not saying the casual person can't get something from the book, but I'm more than sure the person with all the tools can tell me a lot more about the
Mm-hmm.
book, possibly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's what I mean with that. When I sit down to read, I got a whole toolkit. Like
I love
it's
it.
a it's a it's a it's a it's a carpenter going to work with his tool belt
Right.
on. Like man, he going to
Mm-hmm.
get it. You see a carpenter out there with a little pencil behind his ear, just standing there looking around. Like I'm like, oh man, why we paying this dude? Right? I want the man with the belt and sagging down the back of his pants. Like
With
he
the
going to do
plumber's
great.
crack showing and everything.
So
We know that's the one.
that's the guy. So when it comes to reading, I take a very, I guess, a blue collar. That's the way to put it. I take a very blue collar approach
Mm-hmm.
to reading. I read like the way a lot of old school guys work. That's how
Mm-hmm.
I read. Put it like
Okay. So you also encourage people to read books the way that they watch TV. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
that. Man, this is getting fun already. So yeah, so I know it's not just me. A lot of us out here are ADHD in our own
Mm-hmm.
way. So when I try to binge a TV series, if they have 7 seasons of this thing, I am not going to sit and watch 7 seasons straight of one
Mm-hmm.
series. I'm gonna watch, 5 or 6 episodes. That was cool, and then I'm gonna change it to something
Right.
else. Watch some of these. That was cool. I'm gonna watch something else. So like when it comes to reading, once again, we read a lot of
Mm-hmm.
nonfiction, so they're bigger, they're
Mm-hmm.
thick books, and it's heavy,
Mm-hmm.
dense reading, because there are different
Mm-hmm.
kinds of reading. I'm not gonna probably sit down and read a 700-page book like
Right.
straight.
Now we gotta
I'm gonna
break
read
that
some
up with
chapters.
something.
I'm gonna read some chapters. I'm gonna put my little bookmark there, and then I'm gonna go try some novellas, right? Some urban fiction, some erotica or
Right.
something. I'm gonna get some of that. Then I'm gonna put a little bookmark, and then I'm gonna read some young adult. Put a little bookmark. I'm gonna read some
Mm-hmm.
newspapers. So I had a whole show I did on my platform about being a widely read
Mhm.
person, and I really try to embrace that. So I'm trying to use different forms of media, even inside of my
Mhm.
reading. The audio version of
Mhm.
books, newspaper,
Mhm.
journals, articles, comics.
Mhm.
Even I've been doing that
Mm.
lately.
Okay.
Comics.
Mhm.
So I got my palette kind of back to the buffet
Mhm.
concept. I want some of these, and I'm gonna get some of
Mhm.
those, and let me get a steak and give me some nachos. Right? So I'm kind of
Get a little
I'm kind
dipping
of having my
sauce
my,
for the
my
nachos.
give me a little dip, right? So, but to me, back to the fundamentals, the point of that chapter, I know for a person that's just starting to read, to sit down and read one book cover to cover could be a daunting
Mhm.
task.
Mhm.
So to break it
Right.
up, it's one of the avenues to help you keep
Right.
on
And plus,
reading.
sometimes, because we both read fiction and nonfiction, and a lot of times you and I, the nonfiction that we read is really heavy. And, so for me at least, I have to stop. And like The Warmth of Other Suns, I'm still not done. I still have about that much left because, and I've been reading that book probably for 2 years because it's so heavy and some of the stuff is just so infuriating and traumatizing to read. I have to take things like that in doses. And a lot of the history that I read about us, because I don't want to say I'm infatuated with with slavery, but I am just amazed at how much our people have gone through and the layers that there are to slavery. And I feel like it's my duty to know all about that because that's part of my history. That's not all of where we come from because of course our history started in Africa before we were put in chains and brought here. But there's so much of it that, a lot of times I have to break it up with some fiction, some lighthearted fiction, to just balance it out because when you read about the history of our people, at least in this country, none of it is without struggle and trauma and pain. And that's so hard to deal with. Like you can have a mental breakdown if you just keep reading about all this struggle, 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 struggle.
You know what I wanna add to that real quick too is whenever a person comes to me asking me about, for example, a scholar like Dr. Amos
Hmm.
Wilson, that's a whole rabbit hole within
Right.
itself. Like he has so much. Our people are so
Hmm.
well written. He has so much written
Hmm.
content and lectures on YouTube and
Hmm.
everything else. You can spend years just on
Right.
Amos Wilson.
Hmm.
Then you go to Dr. Francis
Oh
Cress Wilson, same
yes.
thing. Then you go to Dr. John Henry
Hmm.
Clark. I mean, per scholar,
Hmm.
their canon could be
Hmm.
deep. So once again, I might spend some days on Dr. Amos
Hmm.
Wilson. Then it's like, I need some
Hmm.
air. I gotta go over here and get
Right.
something else because
It's heavy.
and you gotta like revisit. So I find myself for 12 to 14 years revisiting Dr. John
Hmm.
Henry Clark, and then you
Hmm.
come back, and Dr. Ben Jocannon, then
Hmm.
you come back. So you're kind of doing this ebb and
Hmm.
flow thing over years. We're
Hmm.
talking about.
Hmm.
We're talking about
A
years of
lifetime,
scholarship
really.
because these guys did so good in being
Hmm.
so thorough in their scholarship. I don't think many of us have even touched the surface of these people we're talking about.
Definitely not.
Not even skimming.
Mm-mm.
Not even
No,
skimming.
no, no. It's a lifetime thing. It's a lifetime thing. So, um, people, especially our youth, and you talked about this in the book, might think that reading is boring. But you believe reading can be fun if we engage the content. You touched on this a little bit already, but let's go. Let's circle back to that. How do you engage the content in a book?
Yeah, so an example I gave in a part of my books that I write for the new people that's new to me, every book I write, I want it to be engaging and hands on. So I always leave you things to incorporate. I always give you tips and
Hmm.
suggestions. So one of our fellow bookstagrammers, our sister Mika, the Reader Room
Hmm.
444, she had this annotative color
Hmm.
guide, and I incorporated that in my book where, for example, you would use the color red every time a character did something that stuck out to you in
Hmm.
your mind. You would use the color blue whenever certain key
Hmm.
quotes you want to
Hmm.
incorporate in your life. You use the color green for a plot
Hmm.
twist.
Hmm.
The color pink whenever the antagonist did something. Like you're
Right.
doing these different things in your
Right.
mind. But when you're doing that, once again, you're engaging with the work.
Mm-hmm.
My eyes are looking specifically for a quote that stands out. I like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the plot just twisted. The character
Right.
did that.
Right.
She's just even talking
Mm-hmm.
about it. It's a whole different kind of reading versus I'm just sitting there, yeah. John shot Sally and then whatever. It's like I just really like I remember reading like that, and I have a hard time remembering like why did I even read
Mm-hmm.
like that?
Mm-hmm.
But once again, the reason why I wrote this book until other people, I want to say, taught me how to read
Mm-hmm.
better, then I could read better. So I wanted my book to help a young reader learn to read better
Right.
early. I was a grown man in my 20s when I learned to read
Mm-hmm.
better.
Mm-hmm.
I knew these things in junior high. I could have been a 4.0 student. Who knows?
Right. But we wasn't allowed to write in school books, so.
I mean, that's a different conversation. Right? And look, in my book, you know this, you read the book. I even give you a little caveat to tell a young person, like, look, don't write in
be
the
writing in
library
the
book.
library books. Don't do it.
And I'm like, man, ask your mama first before you do
Right.
this.
Don't be writing in mama's book. You gonna get hurt.
Don't blame Sean P. It's in there. Sean told me that I am not responsible. Disclaimer, I am not responsible.
Sean P said, ask your mama before you write up in that book.
Look, let's talk about the little tabs and bargains and stuff. I said, look, ask your mama to go to Walmart right quick, or Family Dollar,
Right.
Dollar General, whatever y'all got, and get the little colors and the little tabs. Don't just go in there trying to just.
So, on that topic, let's talk about book violence, because it's you, me, and Classy. We all for the book violence, but Gracia and Demetrius and Alicia, they're like, no, I'm for the book violence. I write, I highlight, I tab, I dog ear, and everybody's like, you dog ear? Yes, I dog ear. I do it all.
See, you got levels to this thing. I got levels. I don't dog ear. I don't tear. I
dog
don't break.
ear. I dog ear, and I bend that spine back, honey. I get into it. Bend it back. Smooth it out. See the glue going down the middle.
Now, see, family, I talk about being engaging with the book. She want to be a UFC fighter with the book. Sean never said to be Macho Man Randy Savage and be elbowing book. Look, I want you to just to touch it a little bit. Touch it and caress it. You know, make love to the book. We don't want no fight with the book.
Nah, man. I gotta bend it open. I gotta get that crease in there. And I you know something I do? Every time I go to read a book, before I even open it and start reading it, I go to the back, I look at how many pages there are, and then I divide that in half, and I go halfway, and I will dog ear the page, and then go back to the book. So it's like, it's a thing for me that I have to do every single time that I go to read a book. And then, of course, I have to do the whole thing where I have to highlight, I have to write notes, I have to do all of that stuff. That's like part of what I do. I have to do it.
So I want to hear the beginning part, like finding the middle of the book and then you dog. What's that part about? Tell me that part.
I don't know. I have to, because for me, it's like, okay, I'm getting closer to the midway point of the book. And so, you know, it's like a little goal for me. It's just something I have to do. I don't know. Just something I have to do, Sean.
It makes sense, right? We had a 6-hour drive to Dallas a couple weekends ago, right? And like, you know, as you're on a road trip riding, you see those different signs where it's like, all right, I got this many miles left. Okay, I feel pretty good driving.
Right.
I got that many miles. Okay, I can do this to the next rest stop. Okay, I'm good. Right. So you reading a big book. Mm-hmm. You need them little signs of demarcation, like, okay,
yep.
The first part almost over. We starting part 2. You know, we get to the
rest stop.
You need those signs.
It's the rest stop.
Hey.
Rest stop is 10 miles ahead. That's my rest stop.
Now we're going somewhat different with the conversation, but like I really read
Mm-hmm.
like that. Like for me, I try to tackle a chapter a
Mm-hmm.
night in whatever I'm
Mm-hmm.
reading. A person might do a certain amount of pages
Mm-hmm.
per night. Everybody got their own system, but for me, I want to cut off with that chapter in that. So tonight I'm reading this
Mm-hmm.
many pages. Like, this is where it's at.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't care if it's late in the night or early
Mm-hmm.
in the night. This many pages, I'm done with it for the night. I'm putting it down. I'm doing something
Right.
else.
Yeah, that's what I have to do. Because I read for the show, because I always read the book for the show. And sometimes that's why I try to only have one show per week, but sometimes I end up with 2 shows in a week. So then what I have to do is I look at how many pages each book is. And like, if the show is on a Saturday, then I want to be done by Friday. So I have time to think and write my questions. So I will divide that book up by 5 days and say, okay, this is how many pages I got to read every day to be done by Friday. And if to be done by Saturday. And if it's a Friday book, then I know I have to I have to read that one, more quickly. So then I'm going to divide it into bigger chunks. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to read this one in 3 days. So yeah, it's like and then I'll dog ear those benchmarks along the way. So I know, okay, this is where I go. I'm done. Yeah.
What's up with you? What's up with you and the dog ear thing? What's up with that?
What?
You can't put a little tab right there, or a little
I
bookmark
know
right
you're
there,
not
or
talking to me
a
about
business
dog ear in a
card.
book when you write all in it and highlight
I
it and
don't
everything
know.
else. What is wrong with
You
dog
don't
ears?
dog
What
ear.
is wrong with dog ears? Get out of here.
It's a different level of aggression. You can beat somebody up and you can kill them. There's levels, right? I might assault a book. You like you you like
My books
slash.
are loved.
You are Jack the Ripper. That's your new name, Jack the Ripper.
Look,
Wait till I tell Grace this. We found Jack the Ripper in the Bookstagram family. But no, on a serious note, right? But back to being tactile with the books, I realized as a young adult, if I highlight something, I can't explain scientifically why, but like it sticks to my memory
yeah.
longer. So once again, back to like what I wish I would have known in junior
Mm-hmm.
high, high school, things like
Mm-hmm.
that. I never used to highlight in high school. I would never
We
underline
were not
anything in
allowed
school.
to.
To
We
be
had
honest,
we had to give the books back. So, and I was a horrible student until I hit high school, and then I like hit my stride because honestly, I didn't understand what a teacher meant when they said go home and study. And I would ask my parents and they would try to explain it to me, but I was just like, my brain wasn't catching it. Then in high school, it kind of clicked, right?
that's a whole different level of
Mm-hmm.
conversation. Like once again, reading something and studying.
Right.
If I say I'm reading Stamp from the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
okay. But if I say I'm studying Stamp from the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, that's a whole different
Right.
conversation. To
Right.
me, it
Yep.
is.
Yep.
Now, to some people, it's synonymous, but to me, if you study and stuff from the beginning, that's a whole different
Yeah.
level of a
Yeah.
process.
It is. And then when I was in college and I would highlight things, and I would use different colors because there is a part of me that is, I won't say I have a completely photographic memory, but when I would study for tests, I would do things in different colors. And so, and then I would study. But then if I forgot something while I was taking the test, I could literally close my eyes and see it and see the color. And I could remember what it was about. And then I could go ahead and write down my answers on the test.
Look at you and your superpowers. You like that TV show, the good doctor.
Yep.
You,
You see all the stuff little going on. Yep.
you,
Yep. I love that show.
they be like, I love it too.
Yep.
I love it
Yep.
too. Facts. But so what you were saying about like in high school we couldn't write in our books, right? But what do you think about these days where a lot of our kids have laptops at school? They call them Chromebooks at our schools where we live at. So like my daughter going school shopping, she getting little pens out of habit, and little pencils and all that. I'm thinking to myself, when are you gonna write
Right.
something down? Like y'all do everything
Right.
So now we're going into like digital ebook reading versus physical books. I've gone to physical books a lot more the past few years because I want to engage in the book more. Sure, on all these apps you can highlight in Kindle. You can even make notes in Kindle, but it's different. The physical doing it, writing a note versus just
Yeah.
it's
It is different.
I can't tell you the science, but
And
it's
they
different.
have even done studies where they say that you retain more when you actually write things out with a pen than writing, on a computer. And I believe it. Because when you're typing on a computer, it's not active. You're just, you're looking and you're typing, but when you're writing, it's a different thing. You have to like focus on what you're doing. So it's definitely different.
I mean, we don't want to tell our ages, right? But I tell my daughter about if we was in school to get punished, they'll make us sit in the corner and write your spelling words like 1,000 times.
Go up to the board,
But I bet you it was
write it on the
it was
board.
embedded in your mind, like you just spend hours just writing these
Mm-hmm.
words in cursive or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's embedded in your
Yep.
mind, you
Yep.
know. And I think that our generation might be better spellers than the current generation, where they just Google everything and type
Mm-hmm.
everything on the phone. We got autocorrect. Like we had to
You had to
really
look at.
know how
We
to
didn't know
spell
how
these
to
words.
how to spell a word. Our parents were like, "Get the dictionary, look it up." Okay, but if I knew how to spell it, how am I supposed to look it up in a dictionary if I don't know how to spell it? They're like, "Sound it out, sound it out. What do you think it sounds like? Write it out." And then you write it down,
You better make it
and
work.
then yeah, and then of course I really never had. I always had this uncanny ability too, where I could hear a word and spell it for you, even like it had weird, like a CK or or a PH or all these different words that when you listen to it, you wouldn't think that certain letters are in it. I was always an excellent speller. Yeah, like my dad would. I remember my dad, you know, asking me how to spell words, and I could spell them, and I had no earthly idea what those words meant because I was in elementary school, but I could spell them. I could spell them. I could spell the hell out of a word. Spelling was always my highest grade. Spelling and reading were always my highest marks in elementary school. And then writing. I've always been a writer. Always.
I cannot say the same for myself. I ain't gonna lie on nobody's platform. That was never my. And once again, for the people that's watching it that have young
Right.
readers, I think that my spelling ability increased the more I
Mm-hmm.
read, the more your eyes are seeing various
Mm-hmm.
words. I started actively reading the dictionary and actively looking at the etymology of
Mm-hmm.
words. It increased like naturally. And I speak about that in my book as
Yes.
far as the benefits of reading chapter. I speak on you increasing your
Mm-hmm.
vocabulary and things like
Yes.
that.
Actually, that was my next question. So let's talk about. You talk about how books increase your vocabulary and the tricks that you share in the book to help us build a better vocabulary. Just share a little bit about that. Don't give it all away. Just share a little bit.
Nah. But as I just said a little while ago by accident, that I think that the more you're reading, and once again, we read in nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
So think about it. Most of my bookshelf at my house is probably written by PhDs,
Mm-hmm.
to be
Mm-hmm.
honest. It's Dr. So and so, Dr. So
Mm-hmm.
and so. Everybody I'm naming, these are PhDs in their field. So I spend so much of my time reading the writing of PhDs. And sometimes they're using bigger vocabulary. I have to make myself stop, get the dictionary, or get the Google right quick, pull it up, define it, and to even go further, I try to make myself use that word in a
Mm-hmm.
sentence or in my next conversation, try to incorporate the
Mm-hmm.
word, right? Now, my friends think I'm crazy, but it
It
works.
does. I do the same. We are so much alike. I do the same thing. If I learn a new word, I make sure my goal the next day is to use that word in a sentence. And I get excited when it
But
comes up naturally, like, just like, ooh, I used the new word.
and once again, back to like the average common reader, right? How many people you can raise your hand at your house? You reading the book, you come across a word you don't know, and your natural inclination from school is to skip over it and try to find the context clues in the
Mm-hmm.
paragraph. Like, oh, that's what that was.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of taking the time to stop and actually looking the word up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a
I had to
that's a
train
valid skill
myself to
though,
do it.
because if you're in a test or something and you don't know what a word means, you can't go look it up. So, it's a comprehension skill, but if you're just reading on your own, and let me see do you still have physical copies of a dictionary?
Man, look, I'll give y'all a little Sean P tidbit, right? So I'm sure every major city probably does it. At our major library, twice a year, there's a big, huge
Mm-hmm.
book sale. I mean, crazy
Mm-hmm.
big. I always go straight to the reference book section. I'm getting the thesauruses, dictionaries, Encyclopedia Britannicas. Like I'm going to get that.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta have
Yep.
it. I have various dictionaries. I got a dictionary this big. No lie.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Just bought it last
Me
year.
too.
Crazy dumb
Got a
big. Like
thesaurus too.
I got it for like 25
Mm.
bucks at this used bookstore. But like I really actively sometimes just sit there and just go through it and I'm playing with
Mm-hmm.
words. And as far as the writers in the house, I do a skill drill where I find a random word and I make myself write a poem or a short story covering
Mm-hmm.
that word. That's another way in which I increase my vocabulary by actively using these words.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Now, you talked about too about how traveling can be a great way to rejuvenate and also learn new things and expand your mind. But you said for those who can't afford to travel, there's something else you can do. Let's talk about that.
So in my third book, Expanding Your Vision, The Hero's Journey, shameless plug, but also in this book, I speak about like the greatest education in the world is
Mm-hmm.
traveling, in my opinion. So if you can't afford to travel, for whatever the reason might be, that's your business. But you can always time travel in books.
Mm-hmm.
You can go anywhere you want in the cosmos via books, right? So you can go anywhere, any city, any state, and learn about a place via a book.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something else that I wish I knew when I was a young man in the military, going to 25 different countries. Nothing in my 19-year-old mind said, okay, Sean, you're going to Guatemala. How about taking some time and looking up Guatemala before you land there next
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday at 5 o'clock?
Mm-hmm.
Like, nah, I'm gonna just see it when I get there. I'm just and looking back on it, I regret so many places I went and I wasn't privy to certain things before I went there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's advantageous for our readers to really take some time and look at places, study places, and just broaden your palette, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, how does reading improve your academic abilities?
We just talked about this a little while ago, right? We see it's kind of layered
Mm-hmm.
on the conversation. I love it. It's naturally doing that. Once again, if you're reading more and your vocabulary is increasing, when you're taking the actual, like a written test, a writing test, any of these kind of things, your ability to understand what they're asking you
Mm-hmm.
is raised.
Mm-hmm.
Your ability to articulate your thoughts is increased.
Mm-hmm.
Your comprehension
Mm-hmm.
in this little paragraph they're giving you is increased.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those things help you with all of the classes, not just reading class,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because even in the math class, at some point, there are written word
Mm-hmm.
problems. But guess what? I could be real good at math, but if I don't understand what this paragraph is asking me, I will not come to the right answer on this question.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't comprehend the proper
Mm-hmm.
analysis of the problem, right? So improving your reading improves your grades across the board, not just reading class, not just writing
Mm-hmm.
class. Because there are words in all these
Mm-hmm.
classes. So you got to be able to read. You in biology class trying to understand the science. See, back to etymology, I've been studying like medical
Mm-hmm.
dictionaries, right? You start seeing all this Greek and this Latin and these other languages that's used a lot in medical terminology.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these words have this same common thing in the prefix or the suffix to give you a hint on that's what this
Mm-hmm.
is. If it's a hypo, et cetera, you know hypo means
Mm-hmm.
this. You know, these certain words that give you a hint to what this
Mm-hmm.
is. And that help you do better on your test to increase your academic
Mm-hmm.
production.
Yep.
And I did not know this in school.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize
There's a lot of stuff we didn't realize in school because they didn't teach it. You know, it's just something you have to learn on your
it. And
own.
that's why, and I'm going to go further, right? I'm not going to blame my educators. I had wonderful educators. I wasn't paying attention in class, raised my hand, and also it wasn't presented to me in the way in which I'm talking
Right.
about right now.
Right.
Like your old school teacher just saying, "Hey, go in the dictionary, look up this word right quick." You pretty much like, "Oh man, so and so
Mm-hmm.
just they just saying that." Like they didn't really break down the
Mm-hmm.
why and the benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So me in this book, I'm trying to show the readers like this is why you should do this thing. It's pretty cool actually. I'm trying to make it more attractive to the young readers of
Right.
today.
Yeah. You know, and it also when you read more and it's just it helps you to be a more critical thinker. And when you're a more critical thinker, and you're a black person in this country, and you run up against that wall of racism, which we will all the time, it helps. Yes, you get angry, but being a critical thinker, it goes back to what my dad always told me. He said, you can get angry, but use your mind to respond to the problem. Don't use your
Yes,
emotion.
yes, yes. And my mentors taught me that you want to be a lot more logical than emotional,
Mm-hmm.
right? So back to being critical, take that same energy you have about whatever the problem is
Mm-hmm.
and go into the reading
Mm-hmm.
of how to break down this thing
Mm-hmm.
systematically,
Mm-hmm.
politically, socially, whatever it
Right.
might be. How do I really attack this problem versus just I'm going on social media with all these memes and
Mm-hmm.
posts and all that? Like that's not
Right.
doing anything. That won't change
Mm-hmm.
anything. How do I really go to that state capitol and do
Mm-hmm.
something? Go to the next parent teacher conference, the next school
Right.
board meeting, and do something. That's a different level of
Yep.
action.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, you could
yeah.
get you
I
can
want to
get
also add
angry
one
because
thing.
I get angry, and I'm a cuss. In the house, my husband. I'm like, this happened, and but then after I've got my emotions out, then I have to go into attack mode and
Doing mode.
doing mode
Doing.
and figuring out how
Doing.
I'm
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
intelligently, beat these folks at their own game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to add something on the academic thing before we move
Yeah.
on that I didn't put in the book. But being the professor at one point, being able to read and assess things better helps you to ask better
Mm-hmm.
questions, right? Why would I want to ask better questions, Sean? Because to your teacher, your professor, whoever, they can tell who in the class is asking the best questions.
Mm-hmm.
So subconsciously, they know you're engaging with the content, taking the class seriously. You're not just sleeping in the back of the classroom. And yes, you will get a little more leeway on your
Mm-hmm.
grades. It's just how human nature is. If I know you're really trying in the class, and you say, man, Mr. Sean, at the end of the semester, I need 5 more points for this thing. What can I do? I'm going to give you a little more grace than the person that's always in the
Mm-hmm.
back, not raising their hand, not
Mm-hmm.
participating, coming to class late, leave early.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you want 5 more points? I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
nah, man. You ain't even
Right.
try. You ain't even try. And that's just how people
Mm-hmm.
are. And to make it that way, that's how life is, as far as your social skills.
Mm-hmm.
So asking better, engaging questions, it gets a professor eye, man.
Mm-hmm. And also, you have to ask the right questions to be able to solve problems, because my son is studying data science. That's what he's going to be. He's a data scientist. And he was talking to me about, he just finished this course with this whole thing with Google. They teach you how to be a data scientist. And they in one section of the course, he had to gather a certain amount of information. And when I asked him, I said, well, why is that so why is it so difficult for you? What kind of problem are you running into? And he said, well, you have to ask the right questions in order to get the right answers to be able to give the proper data. So if you're not reading critically, then you're not asking the right questions to get the right answers.
I'm getting excited. Let's do this because both of us are hosts, right? Both
Right.
of us are hosts. So whenever you're watching an interview on TV, let's say, what's her name? The sister
Mm-hmm.
Gail. Gail interviewing Snoop Dogg
Mm-hmm.
on TV. And it goes like incredibly left out the
Mm-hmm.
blue. I'm always thinking to myself, I wonder if it's the interviewer's fault because like your ability to ask better
Mm-hmm.
questions will yield better
Mm-hmm.
answers and responses from your
Mm-hmm.
guests. Now, sometimes every once in a while, the guests just ignorant as
Right.
hell, and they going
Right.
left anyway. I can name a couple of people, but I'm not gonna do that on your platform. Yeah, they go left. I don't care who it is asking the question; they going
Mm-hmm.
left,
Right. Because
right?
that's just what
But
they
for,
do.
but for the most part, both of us are hosts. I know to get the best show out of my guests, I have to ask the most critical, engaging questions
Right.
to make it a good show and P experience.
Mm-hmm.
That's not on my guests to do
Mm-hmm.
that. I gotta provide that.
Yes.
They're only answering what I
Mm-hmm.
give. So that's the beauty of asking a beautiful, wonderful question, man.
Yep.
I was told this quote about you don't show your brilliance in your answer, you show your intelligence in your
Mm.
question.
That's a word.
I always tell my class that at the beginning of the semester, whenever I say something and they all sitting there all shy and quiet, they don't want to raise their hand, I say, look, don't forget this. You show your brilliance in your
Mm-hmm.
question. Don't ever be scared to raise your hand and ask the question. That's you showing how brilliant
Mm-hmm.
you are. And then they start being like, oh, they get more confident
Mm-hmm.
raising that hand, you know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Yep. So let's talk about mastering the clock. Look at him getting all excited. Is he pulling out something? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Does he have it? Does he have it? Let's see. Let's see. Wow! He's got it!
Right. Keep it on deck. Keep it on deck. So for those that's wondering, this is a 5 minute timer sand clock. So I didn't know this if it existed. I thought they only had like the little 1 minute thing come with a game, you just flip it. But this is a 5 minute sand timer. They might have other variations as well. I learned this from Dr. Greg Carr. I gotta always give homage. Dr. Greg Carr talked about this. But whenever we're sitting there reading our stuff, got our little tool set up, I take my 5 minute timer and put it down, and I'm trying to focus as much as I can for this 5 minute time into this work. I'm not checking Instagram. I'm not talking to somebody on the side of me. I'm just totally for 5 minutes focused on the content,
Mm-hmm.
right? When 5 minutes pass, I say, all right, I like where I'm going with this. I flip it again and do five more. And before you know it, what happens is you accumulate 25 to an hour of reading. It's quality reading versus just sitting there. You spend an hour sitting there, but you only really read like 10 pages because you're kind of distracted. You're going back, reading stuff over again. Like that's kind of unfocused reading. So this tool gives you more disciplined
Mm-hmm.
reading. Master the clock.
Mm-hmm.
Another one of my tools I give in the anatomy of a book on how to improve your reading practices.
Awesome. And I need to buy one of those because these stupid timers, I bought this timer for the 5 minute Fridays and the thing don't work. And I had another one that turns, the old fashioned one, and that one don't work. So I'm going to get me a little sand thing and I need it because I'll just be watching time.
5 minute
Yes, I
Friday.
need it. I'm going to get me one. I'm going to get me one.
And let me tell you, right, 5 minutes go by faster
Mm-hmm.
than you think, first of all. But second of all, I had a hard time finding it at first, trying to go to Walmart and Target and all that.
Amazon has
Amazon,
everything.
look it up on Amazon. It comes like a pack of 3 or a pack of 5. I can't remember. So I have these everywhere, which is
Mm-hmm.
why I'm always got one in the vehicle, in my bag, at the house, in different parts of the house. I always keep a 5 minute
Let's
timer
see.
on deck.
Look at that, y'all.
Sure,
5 minute timer. Now, we talked a
5 minute
little
timer.
bit about this already, but we're going to go back to it. You and I are both people who read books from cover to cover. Let's share what people are missing out on by not reading the intros, the notes, the forwards, the reader's notes, the bibliographies. I mean, the bibliographies alone is a whole damn rabbit hole. I have bought so many books just from going in the back and reading the bibliography, because I will read the bibliographies and the forwards and the notes before I even start reading the book.
Let me start there real quick. The bibliography, right? So a long time ago in my Facebook days, I had some wonderful reader friends even back then, and one of my homies always posted the most incredible, mind blowing books I've
Mm-hmm.
never seen before. And I said, Al, how'd you find that book? He'll say, oh man, that was in the back of so and so
Mm-hmm.
book. I'm like, all right. And then like over years, he kept saying, no, that was in the back of
Mm-hmm.
so and so book. So I realized, like, wait a minute, let me start going to the bibliography. 'Cause any given book, right, in the books that we
Right.
read, any given book, it might be 100+ books in the
Right.
bibliography. So once again, it's a whole rabbit hole within
Mm-hmm.
itself because the author kind of giving you, if you enjoyed their book, this is where to go further down the rabbit hole or to get kind of an analysis of why I wrote
Mm-hmm.
this book. These books led me to write this
Right.
book. So if I really enjoy Want of Other Sons, if I start reading these other things that she
Mm-hmm.
read, oh, now I'm getting a deeper
Mm-hmm.
understanding. So the bibliography alone, that's a whole hour-long show
Mm-hmm.
by itself. Just what you gain from that
Mm-hmm.
bibliography. It's ongoing. Your whole TBR can get stacked off
Stacks
the
on
bibliography
stacks on
alone, based
stacks.
on
Yes.
certain authors. So the back of my first book, What's Your Kick? The Guide to Unlocking Your Passion, I did a bibliography
Mm-hmm.
of other self-help books
Mm-hmm.
that I think, in my
Mm-hmm.
journey. I did the same thing in the
Yeah.
first book.
Yeah, and and you don't know what you're missing because like you said, the introduction, if an introduction is like 70 pages, a lot of times that introduction is setting up the book for you. They've taken key points that they've analyzed, and if they have, information about the backstory about certain chapters or certain things that happened, they're sharing it in the intro. And if you haven't read the intro, you don't even know what's going on. Like I managed to find a copy. My dad has a copy of this book called Black is the Color of My TV Tube by Gil Noble, who I told you before is my mentor. And it's signed. I actually met him back in college. But you can't find copies of that book now that aren't like 80 or hundreds of dollars. I managed to find a copy for myself because my dad was like, you can't have my book until I die. But I managed to find a copy that was like $40. And I bought it and I'm rereading it, right? And I haven't read it since like my teen years. And I went back and read the introduction because when I was a teen, I didn't read the introduction. I just went straight to the book. But in the introduction, he talks about how he was scared of Malcolm X. And then when Malcolm X was assassinated, or well, something happened when he ended up meeting Malcolm X and talking about Malcolm X, I think. See, I can never remember stuff. But it was the assassination of Malcolm X that put him on the path to having the TV show like it is. And, just the impact from this man being someone that he used to be afraid of because he was a Martin Luther King fan to being someone that this man deeply admired. And it was because of Malcolm X's assassination that TV stations started, saying we've got to get more, diversity and things like that. That made the whole pathway for Gil Noble to have his show. And it was because of Malcolm X's book that he said that that's what opened up the world of reading for him. And I would not have known that if I hadn't read the intro, and there's just like key things in there that I learned, like, that are just, I would have never known if I skipped it.
Let me give you a little parallel, right? I talk about some of these TV shows out right now, like the Game of Thrones, for example, or the Lord of the Rings, just for an example, right? So some people want to just watch the show
Mm-hmm.
alone. They don't want no kind of backstory. Don't give me no spoilers,
Mm-hmm.
no nothing, right? For me, I go and actively find YouTube videos where a person is explaining backstory, they're
Mm-hmm.
explaining connections. It actually helped me to engage the
Mm-hmm.
content
Mm-hmm.
better, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest. So what you're saying with the introduction and the forwards and stuff in the book,
Yes.
sometimes they give you some real good
Mm-hmm.
setup stuff to help you enjoy the book itself
Right.
better. Especially when there's like a second edition of a book or a later edition of a
Mm-hmm.
book with a new introduction.
Mm-hmm.
This person is giving you a whole nother thing to enjoy this
Yeah.
book
And a
better.
lot of times
Why,
it will help.
why would I say
Yeah.
that?
And a lot of times it will help you. It explains the context of the time that the book was written in, especially like you said, if another edition comes out and there's a new intro, then it helps you to frame the book better so that you can understand why certain things were the way they were.
There's a book I'm reading right now, Randall Kennedy book, The N Word, right? I won't say it out loud in public, but it's a 25-year edition.
Mm,
So he has a brand new introduction on the book, telling you in 25 years since I wrote the first
mm-hmm.
book, this is my change in analysis of the N
Mm-hmm.
word, or what's the same, or whatever it might
Mm-hmm.
be. But that's all in the new
Mm-hmm.
introduction.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
like Angela
see,
Davis, I already had her book. I haven't read it yet. But then, she did an anniversary edition this year. And I actually got a signed copy because there was a bookstore in California that had her there signing copies, and I bought it. And I happened to be reading the intro the other day, and there are actually three intros. And, it was the original one, then there was a second one, and then this one is the one that she wrote recently. And in it, she talks about George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all of this. And, she talks about, she really kind of frames the book and talks about who she is now versus who she was then.
I own a book. I see it in my head a little. I can't think of it in my mind. But anyway, there have been multiple editions
Mm-hmm.
of this book, right? But I love that they have every forward in
Mm-hmm.
that one book. They have every introduction in that one. I love that they put all of them in there, not just
Mm-hmm.
take them out and put the new one in. Like you
Mm-hmm.
can read all of them and see the change of thought and the change of
Yeah.
dynamics as they read through the book. That's beautiful to me,
Yeah.
man. I love that.
Absolutely.
I love
Absolutely.
that. But I want to answer your question as to why that's
Mm-hmm.
important to me. So once again, back in my early scholar days, if I'm reading a book by Dr. Ivan Van
Mm-hmm.
Sertima, for example, and I see that Runoko Rashidi did the introduction and Chancellor Williams did the editorial
Mm-hmm.
part of it or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, I didn't know who those
Mm-hmm.
guys were. So by reading Runoko Rashidi forward in this book, I'm like, wow, this dude is brilliant as
Mm-hmm.
well. They're going to find out
Mm-hmm.
who this is. And now I'm going down this
Mm-hmm.
rabbit hole. And while I'm reading his book, guess what? Ivan Van Sertima did his
Right.
forward. Dr. John Henry Clark did the
Mm-hmm.
afterword. So see, those scholars, instead of debating and fighting
Mm-hmm.
each other, they were all in a
Yep.
lock with each other.
Yep.
So we're doing the forward in each other's book. We're doing the intro in each other's book. I'm editing your book. You editing
Mm-hmm.
my book. And it's all just
Mm-hmm.
together. So you almost can't read them
Right.
apart, to be honest, to really get that person's
Mm-hmm.
life. Because for me, I got certain authors, I want to read
Right.
everything they wrote. So to read everything Dr. Clark wrote, I got to read his forward over
Mm-hmm.
here, his intro over
Mm-hmm.
here. He edited Marcus
Mm-hmm.
Garvey. I got to read all of that, read all
Right.
Dr. Clark wrote. And that kind of started me on a journey of reading
Mm-hmm.
complete books, not just
Yeah.
parts of books.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, what are some final tips that you can share that will help people become better readers?
My major final tip I would give is to actually, with this technology we have, any book you're going to read, try to find a YouTube video about that book first. Because you can most times find the author somewhere speaking about the book or on their tour or on their lecture circuit. You can find some kind of pregame to the
Mm-hmm.
book. I found it helped me engage the content better. And secondly, believe it or not, I can hear the author voice when I'm reading it after I've heard
Mm-hmm.
them talk, right? I really can. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. But I find it funny somebody read my book and they say, Sean, I heard your
I
voice when
did.
I
I
read it.
heard your
It
voice when I
sounded
was
just
reading
like
your
you.
book. I did.
I find that comment funny, like, wait a minute.
I heard
It
it.
sounded just
Yep. Yep.
but as far as the tip for the readers go, really try to find the author talking about that book because for me it definitely increases my enjoyment of the reading experience. I've been like five
Mm-hmm.
years doing that. In the book I'm reading, I try to find the author talking about it,
Yeah.
if I can help it. Unless I'm interviewing the author, now I don't want to hear him before the
Don't want
interview.
to spoil it.
That's a different conversation. I don't want to
Right.
It's when I'm interviewing, for example, if I interview Nick
Mm-hmm.
Stone, right, and she's done a million interviews, I'm really trying to ask her 10 unique questions to
Right.
Sean P. So I don't want to hear what you did on Breakfast Club and what you did over here, what you
Right.
did with you, and I don't want to hear that. I want to hear my own take on Nick
Mm-hmm.
Stone. That's my
Right.
goal. Because I'm really, really going for the author to say, I never heard that before. I love when they say
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yes.
To me, in my athletic mind, it's like a slam dunk or a
Mm-hmm.
touchdown. Whenever they say, man, that
It's
was a
like,
good question.
yes.
I'm sitting there like this for the camera. I'm on camera like this.
You're like,
But in my mind, I'm like, think that.
it's the Sean P
Coming to America.
experience, baby.
Coming to America, boy, I say, in the face.
I love it. I love it. So, where can we find your books?
Yes, ma'am. So all of my books are on Amazon.com. Four of my books are in Kindle format. Three of my books are in Kindle and audio format. And my first book, What's Your Kick, is in paperback
All
and
right.
Kindle. Yes. Search my name, Seanathan Polidore, on all platforms: Amazon, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. You'll
Okay.
find it.
I still have to study your name because that name is so interesting. That last name, Polidore. I have to study that. I got to do some research on it.
Let me know what you find, 'cause I'm
I
curious
will.
too. I'm curious too. I'm
And where
curious.
can we find you on social
Yeah.
media?
Yeah, once again, man, my name is Seanathan Polidore. It comes up pretty fast. You'll see it. Facebook, Instagram. I'm on Instagram more than anything. So I am on TikTok. I post there sometimes. I'm a little bit on Facebook these days, but for the most part, my bread and butter is Instagram, Bookstagram. I found my tribe there. I found my people there. So I'm on Instagram more than anything. I'm doing videos like constantly inspiring, motivating, and uplifting scholarship.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing your time and talents with us today, sir. We made it. We did it.
This has been fun. This has been so good. Good as anticipated. And I'm so glad you allowed me to come back and do
Oh,
it again.
absolutely.
I want to come back another time.
Absolutely.
I got a brand new book that's coming in a few months. I'm saying it here first. I would love to come to your platform and bring the book to your
Absolutely.
platform.
Let me know when. We'll make it work, sir. We will make it work. Yes. And Booze and Bros, you know how I do. You know what time it is. Today's quote comes from one of the greatest intellectual minds, the late, great Malcolm X. And he said, people don't realize how a man's whole life can be changed by one book. Until next time, y'all, you know what to do. Grab a book and read. And I'm out. I love it. Thanks for lending me your ear today. If you enjoyed this content, please head over to betweenthereads.com and leave a rating for the show. While you're there, consider supporting this independent podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/betweenthereads. Join us next week for another great episode.